Yes.
Okay, welcome everyone. This is me, Sidearm, talking up here in the female avatar in a white toga, and I'm going to direct your attention to our slides, which are up top center where I am now sitting. So if you don't know how to move your camera, just point your cursor towards me and Alt-click. Here we go. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this presentation on Avatar, Identity with Intent. The purpose of this presentation is to think of identity as a choice. Understanding this approach can empower our actions and results in the virtual and natural worlds. I am James Neville of Online Media Service of Development One LLC Texas, Avatar Sidearm, and my co-presenter is John O'Connor of Technological University Dublin, Ireland. John and I teach learning in virtual reality for the Virtual Worlds International Student Project and programs. In this presentation, we will share principles and practices of identity with intent, taken from our actions teaching collaborative online engagement to university students as avatars in a 3D virtual reality environment. We will conclude with a recap and opportunity for discussion. We like to include interactivity in our teaching. Please take a pencil and a piece of paper and draw a line, top to bottom, dividing it into two columns. Label the first column what the presenter says. Label the second column my thoughts and responses. As you listen to our presentation, please feel free to jot notes on what we say and on what you think about it in the two columns. We call this bicameral note taking and find it helpful in maintaining focus and relevance. Principles and Practices, Part 1. Over to you, John.
Thank you, Sidearm. So I have now taken Sidearm's place here on the high seat above the slides. So hopefully that will help you all focus on the slides. We have a writer here in Ireland called Moncán McGann, whose name has no direct English translation. He writes primarily in the Irish language, and in his recent book, 32 Words for Field, he taught Kerry as a child. Irish remains the first language in that part of the island, and the locals would greet him with the phrase "Nach tú," which literally means, "Isn't it yourself?" He would answer, "Is me," which means "it's me," and adds that although I was never all that certain who I was, I envied the locals their sense of certainty. To reflect on who we are, and more particularly, to think about the idea of self, we really need to begin by contemplating the nature of reality. There are various lenses through which reality can be considered: scientific, religious, philosophical, or artistic, for instance. It may even be said that the true purpose of life is to come to some understanding about reality. This is what Socrates intended, according to Plato, when he claimed that the unexamined life is not worth living. Plato also acknowledged that this examination of life is far from simple. In his allegory of the cave, he proposes that seeking the truth is a painful process and is also an individual journey that, once embarked upon, does not really permit a return to previously comforting beliefs. Currently, as explained by theoretical physicist Sean Carroll, scientists actually spend more time thinking about what they do not know about the nature of reality rather than what they do know. He suggests the world appears to us in layers rather than in one single unified thing. Thus, there are different ways of talking about reality. For example, in one layer, a chair can be described in terms of its physical manifestation as a materialistic object with shape and form. It is made of cloth and fabric and wood and metal. In another layer, the chair is a collection of atoms, of elementary particles, held together by the laws of physics. He concludes that the feature of reality that is worthy of our consideration is that there are many overlapping, seemingly different, but ultimately compatible ways of talking about it. Alan Wallace, the noted Buddhist scholar, quotes the early American pioneer in psychology, William James, who said that what we attend to is what we wind up taking to be real, and that which we don't attend to fades out. Wallace is concerned that the weakness with modern science is that we have overlooked the nature of the observer. It would be completely inaccurate to suggest that he equates the observer directly with the self, but his proposition affords the opportunity to explore the self and think about how identity arises. Daniel Dennett tells us that what makes the self is a whole collection of memories and projects and plans and likes and dislikes, a psychological profile, if you will. Faced with a complicated, living human being, we try to make everything cohere around a single point. That's the self, the center of narrative gravity. He believes that this only seems to be consciousness, but it does not follow that there actually is consciousness. In fact, he is adamant that the self is merely an illusion. On the other hand, philosopher Galen Strawson suggests Dennett's position is provably false. He argues forcibly that our experience of consciousness cannot be denied, and he wonders if it is not the incompatibility with physics that leads Dennett and others to say consciousness must be an illusion. And as if all of this doesn't make it hard enough for us to understand who we really are in the natural world, when we join Second Life, we are required to develop yet another identity in the form of an avatar. At At first, this may seem quite straightforward. We start by selecting a name, then choosing a look from a selection of avatar archetypes. It is only as we become settled residents that questions of identity begin to bubble up in earnest. Do I want my avatar to reflect my natural world identity, or something completely different? Will I be exploring an aspect of my personality that might not be possible to do in the natural world? Some people, like me for instance, try to bring our natural world identities into Second Life by designing avatars that match our physical selves as closely as possible. Perhaps this is because my main reason for being here is to teach, and therefore my avatar requires the use of my credentials from the natural world. But let's be honest, most residents come here to explore a second life, to reinvent themselves in some way. There can be many reasons for this, but the result is usually the same. They prefer to remain anonymous, perhaps to all but a few close friends. Virtual worlds afford the opportunity to explore different personas, different personalities, different selves in a relatively safe environment, perhaps even without consequences. Nevertheless, identity and the development of ourself is not without repercussions. It is a continuous process rather than a single act. And while much of it takes place in our subconscious, it is our contention that our identity is not entirely outside our control. In ancient classical theatre in Greece and Rome, actors held different wooden masks to their faces to project characters. The masks were known as personas, leading to our use of the term today. We all use different personas, depending on the social situation in which we find ourselves. The person we are when at home with family is not necessarily the same one who goes to work, who socializes with friends, or the individual who attends events such as this. And the private self may well be one that is not revealed to anyone else. These personas are developed over a lifetime in response to social engagements and interactions, frequently without a conscious decision, but somewhat automatically in the subconscious part of the mind. Our identity then is composed of these many personas. The Lebanese-French writer Amin Maalouf opens In the Name of Identity with a question. So, am I half French and half Lebanese? He answers, of course not. I haven't got several identities. I've got just one. He asserts that identity isn't given once and for all. It is built up and changes throughout a person's lifetime. This echoes the concept of conjugating identity, given to me by Awam Amka, the Nigerian playwright and professor of drama at Tisch School of the Arts. I like this notion of identity because it encompasses the continual recitation of ourselves while recognizing the self as a composite of our many personas. Now, let's consider the term avatar for a moment. It was first introduced to the digital games space in the 1980s by Richard Garriott, developer of Ultima 4 Quest of the Avatar. He later explained that he wanted the player to respond to what are called moral dilemmas and ethical challenges as they personally would respond. He said that the character you were creating in the game, I wanted to be you, not your alter ego. He intentionally appropriated the ancient Sanskrit term that describes the manifestation in the physical world of a deity from the spiritual realm, realizing it was a perfect fit for the game. Neal Stephenson went on to popularize the term in his 1992 novel Snow Crash, which also, by the way, introduced the term metaverse. And it is now commonly used to describe our digital manifestations in most online applications. Garriott may unwittingly have bequeathed us an important approach for interacting with technology. The inherent power vested in the term is a reminder that our tools, no matter how complex or sophisticated, are our own conceptions. One of my colleagues here in TU Dublin, philosopher Noel Fitzpatrick, notes the origin of the word technology in ancient Greek, techne, meaning a system or a method of making or doing, an art or a craft, a technique or a practice. This supports the broader understanding of technology, not just as a tool, but more importantly, as a form of becoming human. Through techne, all forms of techniques and practices, we become who we are, both as individuals and as society. An avatar permits embodiment and facilitates intervention in virtual world environments, therefore affording the opportunity not only to explore the virtual, but also to consider what it truly means to be human, whether inhabiting the natural world or virtual environments. Understanding the fluidity of identity as something we can intentionally affect, develop, and even choose can be simpler in virtual worlds. The very name Second Life offers that coveted opportunity to start over again, erasing the mistakes of the past and taking on a fresh persona. While it is important to recognize the influence that a lifetime of conjugating identity has upon us, the act of inhabiting an avatar provides the possibility of intentionally adopting a new persona. The act of observing our avatar in the virtual space gives just enough sense of distance to allow conscious self-determination to get a foothold. This powerful phenomenon, in which the behavior of an individual within virtual worlds is changed by the characteristics of their avatar, is recognized in psychology as the Proteus effect. Nick Yee and Jeremy Bailenson demonstrated this effect, and the results of their studies showed embodiment produced more significant behavioral changes than mere observation of the same visual stimuli. These findings support the claim that our avatars provide a unique lever to behavioral change. In my teaching here in Second Life, I use the exploration of identity as a starting point for discussing responsibility. University students are in the process of becoming citizens who will contribute to the development of society, and thus the development and refinement of an approach to responsibility is essential, not only for their benefit, but for society. And increasingly, this means our global society. We consider this from three distinctly related perspectives: personal, professional, and social. I believe this is such a fundamental aspect of education that it requires direct confrontation. So in addition to looking at what we mean by identity, one of the other tools I use in the class is fiction. Students are given the short story The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas by Ursula K. Le Guin to read in advance of the class. The story is a wonderful allegory from 1973 that is as fresh today as when it was written, and allows for a gradual sense of realization to dawn. It doesn't offer any solutions, but it confronts us with a very difficult social and ethical problem that, just like the protagonists in the story, we can choose to ignore, accept, or walk away from. This provides students with a tool to use in their own development of their selves, their identities, and their understanding of responsibility. This all leads to our belief, Sightarm's and mine, that identity with intent is about the power or knowledge leading to awareness and resulting in action. Back to you, Sightarm.
All right. Okay, follow the bouncing avatar. So thank you, John. We're now doing Principles and Practices Part 2. Avatar, identity with intent, rests on a foundation of self-perception as conversations in physical, emotional, and cognitive realms. These conversations are language statements, of which half are inherited and half are potentially self-spoken. Our physical bodies are fully capable of self-speaking. Wherever you're sitting right now, just reach your arm up and stretch and bring it back down. You have just made a physical language statement. As extensions of our physical bodies, our avatars are also capable of self-speaking. When you walked around and sat today in Second Life, your avatar was making a physical language statement. The potential for self-speaking gives us the opportunity to enhance the quality and interactions of our lives, to more fully create expressions in physical reality of ideas and feelings that we first imagine and experience in mental reality. Perceiving in practice the fluidity and power of our ability to self-speak ourselves is perhaps easier to comprehend when we create and operate as our own avatars. The experience of freedom, this experience of freedom, can reflect back to reshape our experience of our physical existence. The writer Jane Roberts wrote, We create our own reality. It might better be stated, we create our own experience of reality. We create our experience of reality through how we move, feel, think, act, and speak. Speech acts. The entrepreneur Fernando Flores created workshops called Conversations for Action based on his work with computer language and the language theory work of J.L. Austin and John Searle. Flores' work was influential in the development of the modern coaching industry. Conversations for Action coached participants in distinguishing speech acts such as promises, requests, assertions, declarations. I have found these action statements useful in working with myself and others. My experience and practice rely heavily on the learning and experience of many practical seminars, workshops, and trainings. I put my focus on trying and testing what works. I adjust as needed and add effective techniques to my body of practice. I blend many models into a multi-tool hybrid toolkit. So, in my work, I have come to see myself and others, like you, as ontological beings who exist in the realm of self speaking. Our existence as physical and emotional beings is relatively fixed or frozen by the biological bodies and socioeconomic environments into which we are born. This physical and emotional existence is somewhat subject to positive change through exercise, habits, migration, and the trusted counsel of others. Our existence as ontological beings is relatively fluid, flowing. It is based on language statements open to personal awareness and adjustment. This ontological existence is highly subject to positive change through awareness of our inner declarations, through training, practice, and the trusted counsel of others. Our power lies in awareness of where we have something to say about it. This is identity by declaration. We have the ability to edit what we say about ourselves. Here's an exercise. On a sheet of paper, draw a vertical line. In the first column, put the title, What Other People Say About Me. On the second column, put What I Say About Me. So identify some positive things others have said about you and put them in the left column. Identify some negative things others have said about you and put them in the left column. Now, identify some positive things that you say about yourself and put them in the right column. Identify some negative things that you have said about yourself and put them in the right column. Look at what you have written in the left column. This is your public persona. It is how you are perceived by others. Look what you have put in the right column. This is your private persona. It is how you are perceived by yourself. This is an example of your ontological identity expressed in words. It is a dynamic, self-maintaining, intertwined ball of threads of conversations. Some are mutually supporting, some are mutually contradictory, adding and dropping these threads and changing as we go through our life experiences. What we say about ourselves in this inner dialogue is editable, but our ontological identities pretty much just roll along as is, unless and until there is an impetus for change. This impetus can be external from outside, or it can be internal from ourselves. When you edit your inner dialogue, you will still have to follow through with actions and results in your outer dialogue. One tip for doing this is to let people know about your new self and have them begin to reflect it back at you. This way, it begins to show up on the public persona column as well. Here is an example of self-editing. On the left are labels I have heard applied to me in the past, and on the right is what I say about it. While I acknowledge the critiques on the left, I give my attention to the declaration on the right, and I act in the public world to make the private declaration real. Here's an application: identity and team roles. I use conversations for action and ontological principles in working with teams through coaching students to operate as effective team members. I see all of my students as having the potential to be effective leaders. I define a leader as someone who sees what's missing like a possibility and speaks it into existence. I see a new group of students, like yourselves, some of whom are responding in class when asked to speak up. I see that their leadership is missing like a possibility, and that my goal over the next 8 weeks or the next hour is to help them speak their leadership into existence. Behaviorally, I call on each one of them until they at least say or type something, and then I acknowledge them and I thank them. Their self-conversation has moved from, I am not someone who speaks up in class, to, I am someone who can speak up in class on demand. The teams are asked to elect officers. Then the teams are each called to the front of the class. Each student in the team is asked, who's the team leader? Some don't say a word. Some speak up. I acknowledge them all no matter what they say or don't say. Their self-conversation has moved from, I am someone on my own, to, I am someone belonging to a team. Sometimes I get a student who says, well, I guess I'm the team leader, and I acknowledge them. From there on, their internal conversation has moved from, I guess I am the team leader, to I am the team leader. And I reinforce this new self-perception at every opportunity, introducing and referring them to others as red team leader, the blue team leader, the green team leader, and so on. Let me be clear. I don't tell the students all of this background that I'm telling you. Shh. I learned that it sunk in better through live fire exercises for the students to experience themselves as members of a team, to experience themselves as team leaders. But I'm telling you, you master's students who are going to be TAs, you adult faculty members who know what I'm talking about, I am telling you the theoretical basis of my practice because I enjoy sharing it. And I invite you to test this ontological point of view for application. At the end of each semester, we have a course debrief with the students, and we ask them, how did the course go for you? What did you like? What did you wish? Frequently, students say, it was easier for me to speak as an avatar than in real life. So that gives a good example of the freedom of being an avatar. Interestingly, some students say it was harder for me to speak as an avatar than in real life. So that gives a good example of the power of seeing yourself in more than one realm and realizing that you are a more fluid being than you may have realized. There are 9 teamwork roles identified by research, Belbin, as being effective in order to facilitate a team's progress. I think of these 9 roles as optional masks or personas that I can choose to wear on one particular team, and I can take off that mask and put on the other mask with another team. In our student work, we have them elect a team leader and a communication coordinator on a formal basis. This covers 2 of the team roles. But we keep our eyes on them for those individuals who can act as specialists in building or communication skills, or as reliable team workers. As the students become more familiar with each other, they begin to distribute who's going to do what tasks amongst themselves. They are learning to see and express themselves as different and new personas than they have perhaps ever experienced before. Here is an application in organization development. I use conversations for action and ontological principles in strategic planning work with organizations through visioning sessions where I ask them to see what's missing like a possibility. In this case, the future of the organization does not yet exist. It could be forecast as more of the same of what we are doing now, or it could be visioned and created as something larger that cannot yet be seen. I see the future existence of the organization as missing like a possibility, and I arrange live fire sessions for the officers to begin to self speak and experience their group as a bigger, bolder entity, including but also expanding beyond what they have already achieved. I reinforce this new self perception at every opportunity, introducing and referring to them to others as the evolving world class organization that they are. In the physical realm, we experience ourselves and others through 9 to 21 senses, physical senses, and through speech. In the avatar realm, we experience ourselves only in sight, sound, movement, and words. But that is enough. That is enough to open our perception of the ability to self speak who we are. Creating an avatar is deliberate and requires thought. In doing so, we experience our identities and abilities as more fluid. We experience the opportunity to self speak ourselves. We experience the power to take on bigger roles and challenges. We are avatars, identity with intent. Thank you for your attention. We open the floor. John?
Thank you, Saitar.